Have you ever been told that you need to be willing to say no more often and then give reasons why you should be willing to say no in a professional setting? You'll hear that today on the Unity Talks podcast.
Welcome to Unity Talks, where the hiring experts of Dallas-based recruiting firm Unity Search engage in lively discussion with successful business leaders to dissect their careers and how they got to where they are today, the obstacles overcome to reach their success, and steps they've taken to stay at the top of their respective fields. So listen in as we provide you with the thought-provoking conversation and ideas that keep industries moving forward.
And welcome back to another edition of the Unity Talks podcast, where we meet with business leaders all across DFW talking about how they got to that position in their career, what keeps them there, and how they keep learning. Today's episode, we are joined with our guest, Jennifer Eygnor. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Hello, David. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited you're here. So Jennifer is the Director of Revenue Operations and Accounting for Sonder. Mm-hmm. And as we always kick it off, you got to give like the commercial on Sonder. Give them some free advertising here.
All right. Well, Sonder is a new hospitality company. It's been around since 2014, and we're revolutionizing the industry right now. So it started off as a small company that we sublet apartments. Now we are leasing entire apartment buildings, taking over resorts and hotels that really cater to the millennial generation, where you can have your own apartments and come and go as you please, and really in urban areas. So you have that home feel as you're traveling versus the standard traditional hotels.
So how did this fare during the pandemic, right? Because it's kind of a hoteling type situation. Mm-hmm. So things go well. How did y'all make it through?
Actually, Sonder fared very well because of the apartment style. It took on travelers for long-term leasing. So we had people coming in that would stay for 30 plus days because it's apartment. They're fully furnished, laundry, but you get the concierge with the amenities of you still get your house cleaning. You still have people delivering food to you. So it's the apartment style living, and that's pretty much what started the digital nomad that we know today, working from everywhere.
Is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. International?
Yep.
We are headquartered
in San Francisco, but we're international. We're about 10 countries.
Okay. Are y'all remote?
We're 100% remote. We implemented work choice in January, so we can work from anywhere. You can do hybrid in the office or travel the world and work from one of our locations in Portugal, Spain, wherever you want to be. Yep.
And you office here?
And I office here in Dallas, at home.
At home, with two kids, in the summer, with a husband that travels because he's a consultant.
Yep.
Fun.
It's fantastic.
We're going to get to that maybe a little bit later, but we always start with kind of a history on, introducing our audience to our guests. So I'm going to give a very brief, rough sketch here, and you're going to fill in a lot of blanks here. So You're a SoCal girl.
I'm a SoCal girl.
Right? I was told not to use, I'm from the OC, David.
No, it's not the OC, and it's not Cali either.
Okay, not Cali.
It's not Cali.
Let me mark that off my card.
People like to call it Cali. It's not. That's how you know you're not a native Californian.
Okay. So I've heard the same about San Francisco. You're supposed to say San Francisco, not San Fran.
Not San Fran or not Cisco.
Yeah, they do not like that.
It's the city or San Francisco.
Yes. All right, so SoCal, is that good?
That's good.
Okay?
That's good.
Okay, all right, good. I passed.
Yeah,
test
pass
number
with
one.
that.
All right. So when you were younger, you had a dream to do something completely different than accounting.
Yes.
And at 17 years old, that dream was killed. Tell us, what did you want to do, and why was that dream killed?
I always wanted to be a physical therapist. I wanted to go into sports medicine, and I wanted to work with pro athletes. At the time, it was with the Denver Broncos. I must have had a love for the Broncos at the time. And then from there, as I got older, I wanted to actually open my own swim school because I was a competitive swimmer growing up.
You were the Katie Ledecky before Katie Ledecky,
yeah,
right?
I was. Just not as successful and decorated.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what killed it? Well, I mean, you wanted to work with professional teams. You wanted to work with John Elway and the Denver Broncos, and then that goes away, and all of a sudden you're an accountant.
Yeah. So, all of a sudden. So, in high school, there was an ROP program that I could have worked with the physical therapists that went to all the different high schools within the community I grew up in. And so I got into the ROP program. I went into the office. They wanted me to do, ultrasounds on athletes, right?
Okay.
I'm like, do what? Like, no training, no, this is how you do it. And so I'm like, it was a horrible experience for me. And then looking into college classes, then learning that I had to take gross anatomy and work on cadavers, yeah, that killed it for me. I'm like, no, I'm not working on dead bodies.
I might have been okay with that. I got to ask, though, what does ROP mean?
Oh my, it's that art. That's the. Oh my, now I don't even remember. But the occupational for
Okay. While you're in high school, you get to
and you get the credits, and then you move on to college.
Gotcha.
And, yeah,
Totally gotcha.
So, and the irony of all this is, when I went to undergraduate school, it was one of the best sports medicine programs in the Midwest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's where I was going to go next, right? So you're from Southern California and end up at Central Michigan.
Yes.
Like, how does I don't even know how that works.
It doesn't. No. Actually, I was applying to colleges, and my dad had received his MBA from Central Michigan, and he had never been there. He was remote in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
he's like, so if I go there, I get in-state tuition. And so he's like, you're going there.
Yeah. No choice.
No, yeah, exactly. Say goodbye to Boulder
Right.
and say hello to Central Michigan in the middle of nowhere.
So you wipe the tears away and you end up in Central Michigan.
Yeah, no, I was still crying when I was there for 2 weeks.
Okay. I love the vulnerability there. That's great. So there goes being a physical therapist. Like, that's out the window. I got to figure out what I want to do. And you end up getting an education. You're in accounting and finance now. Matter of fact, if we fast forward your career, we don't want to necessarily go all the way to the end yet. The majority of your career has been in revenue, specifically. Like, you are a revenue expert, whether it was in healthcare, telecom, now you're in a hospitality type role. It's been focused on revenue. The thing that's unique about your career, or we'll probably spend a lot of time here, is you didn't go the traditional accountant path from an education standpoint, or even from the beginning of your career, starting in Big Four, public accounting. Was that by design? Was that your intention? Did it just manifest itself that way?
So I actually went to school for finance and eventually went on to get my MBA. And my goal was to be international investment banker. So I loved investments. I wanted to go international. But by the time I got into my career, it started off in the telecom industry, in the wireless industry, and started off actually in the revenue assurance, which is more on the technical side. And it just skyrocketed from there, and went through all the facets of the revenue accounting side of the house.
Yeah, it's real. You actually just bring up a point there, almost inadvertently a little bit, which is not necessarily where we're going, but I want to pause on it for a second. When you start your career, when you're a high performer and you're moving quickly, it becomes really challenging to all of a sudden change career directions and go, you know what, I want to go this other career path, because by then your salaries have increased, your responsibilities have increased, and you realize if you completely change career paths, there's kind of a little bit of a reset and a learning curve button. Is that something that you processed through when you were thinking about, oh, this isn't really investment banking, but I'm going to stick this out because it's going well?
Yeah, it's just more of like, I think after college, kind of what I got into. So I just went to the path. I think it was more of when it came to interviewing. I was interviewing at banks when I was still living in Michigan, but it ended up going the accounting route, which is, to your point, is interesting because I did not go the CPA route. I went the MBA route, and I ended up in the accounting way instead of the finance way. So you think I would have gone to the FP&A or the financial side of the house, which never have been in that side of the corporate world.
Yeah. Okay, so then that poses another challenge. So now you are going this accounting path. You're smart, you did great in school, you're working your way up quickly. The jobs you're going after it with people who have a CPA. And not that there's anything wrong. Like, you can get a CPA and an MBA, you can get all that stuff. Like, all that's great. But you chose, I'm going to get an MBA. I am accounting path. I know I'm going to go against CPAs to get this job. Like, why not go back to school to get accounting hours for a CPA? Just didn't want to? And did you know you were going down that path where it's a very competitive career path?
Yeah, so the thought of going back for my CPA never crossed my mind. It's not where I wanted to go. I got my MBA. I'm done with school. And I think when going on to the interviews and the experience that I had as I'm growing, to your point, I was up against CPAs, but I knew me. I knew the hard worker. I knew my knowledge and my experience. So I was an advocate for myself, and I had to sell myself. So it was, once you get past the paper part, to get that interview, you have to get through the paper part. But once you're in person and you're in that interview, you have the 100% responsibility to yourself and that opportunity to sell yourself and prove that you are just as worthy, if not more worthy, than possibly the other candidates that do have CPAs and are coming out of Big Four.
I talked about, you hit on something there, and we're going to pause on this for a while, maybe the rest of the time, because I think it's important for people to hear, because not everybody's going to get a CPA. And yet some of them are just as qualified, if not more qualified than those who don't. And again, if you have one, it's nothing wrong with that either. We're not disparaging anybody that has one. But one of the things that you said is, I'm not going to go back to school. Like I was done with that. I've moved on with my life, right? We get married, we start having kids, we start having a family. How do we fit that in with everything else we have going on? And you said, I knew I needed to sell myself. And I say that to people who go to interviews all the time. It's part of my interview prep. It's like, you're an accountant. You are about to go on a sales job, and you are going to sell the thing you know better than anybody else, which is yourself. And I truly believe that's what matters when you go. You're not a used car salesman. You're not going to lie and make things up, but you truly have to put on that persona of a salesperson, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you just have to prove to everyone that you know what you're talking about, and they're interviewing you because you are the person that knows it. The person interviewing is not the expert. That's why they're hiring you. So you just have to let them know what your skills and capabilities are and prove to them, just because you don't have a CPA, I'm just as educated with an MBA. And whether it's a finance or accounting degree, in my case it was a finance degree, that you can do it with your experience. Because the education was 4 years, 6 years if you have that MBA, the experience, you learn so much more on the job, and you're still educating yourself. With revenue accounting, through the years things have changed as we went from hardware, software, to get some people some revenue accounting experience, to a SaaS environment, and then implementing the different guidance. I did that. Everyone is capable of reading the guidance and implementing and learning just as much as the person that had received their CPA 10 years ago. So we're all in the same boat.
So knowing that is so competitive, and you're going after these same jobs as them. I mean, I'm sitting here going, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, yeah, I probably told Jennifer before that they're probably not going to look at you because you don't have a CPA. Like, I know I've been in that chair because we're advocating for our client at the time, like, we got to find someone with this. There's no flexibility. How do you, on your end, when you know that that's a competitive environment, how do you advocate for yourself? How do you position yourself in an interview?
So, well, one, to get the interview, knowing your resume. So let's start with the resume.
Okay.
Knowing how much you know, the knowledge you have, put that on the resume. Put your successes, put your accomplishments that are just as good as the person with the CPA. You're going to do the same accomplishments, right? Prove to you that you're capable of doing it. And you might have to do that one step extra to put those quote unquote buzzwords out there, that you know what you're talking about, to be able to even get that resume in front of the person to get that interview. But then once you're there, be authentic, be who you are. The interviewer is going to know if you're lying, right? Doesn't matter. You just be able to express and communicate what you know and why you deserve the job.
Yeah. I think a lot of using examples, using like detailed content, like, this is the situation I faced that sounds like it's similar to what you're asking me. And so here's the drawn out example. And that's the best you can do. Like, let's take the fact that we're going against someone with a CPA or none of that matters. At that point in time, you're just competing with the best version of yourself, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You definitely know the job that you're interviewing. Obviously, if you go into your career like I've done, going into leadership, they're looking at different qualities, right? I'm no longer trying to justify or explain that I know the accounting or, all the different revenue recognition rules. Now it's more into your leadership skills. But those that are really starting out in their career, and if you're coming out with a finance degree or an MBA, really just talk about how you know those skills. You understand those T accounts, right? Or the revenue accounting or whatever it may be that you're going after, that you understand the basics just as much as the CPA if you're going up against those with those qualifications, or the preferred or required, as they like to say.
Yes, required. That's definitely the word. So young in your career, you've got to leverage the education, really immerse yourself into the job, and keep learning. The other thing that you told me from a revenue function specifically is you have view of the entire organization and the entire operations, and you almost have almost like a predictability path of where the company is going. So tell us a little bit about the view that revenue gives you.
It really gives you the whole view of an organization, because with revenue accounting, you have to understand technical revenue. So you have to read and review the contracts, work closely with legal and sales to make sure that legal, sales, and financial are all aligned. And then with the operational side, you have to implement what those agreements say. So you have to work with everyone across the organization, developers, engineers, who else? Trying to think of like FP&A to make sure they're set up correctly in the system and flowing through all your systems. Because in today's world, we're going through multiple systems to get to the accounting software, and so you have to understand the ins and outs of the organization. So you begin to understand and speak IT, FP&A, accounting, sales. You really be able to build those relationships and collaborate. Because you got to know the contracts, but then if you're on the operational side, it's more of what people refer to as back office or billing, accounts receivable. So you are responsible for the collections. So you need to know, how does it flow through the system in order to collect on the money, and was it correct? So you really get the bird's eye view of everything, and it really expands your business acumen and how organizations run. It gets you outside of just the accounting world and be able to think broadly and understand, when you implement something, how is it going to impact your colleague or another stakeholder? You don't just think about yourself and your own department.
Yep.
You really think organizationally, long-term goals.
Yeah, I feel like when I listen to you talk, you can, in some accounting roles and even finance roles, you can kind of operate in a silo. You can put blinders on, heads down, and you're just behind your desk. But just listening to you talk, you realize you can't do that in a revenue role. You really have to pick your head up, see the bigger picture. So I want to apply that practically into your career, because early on in your career, you started out heavy telecom. I started out heavy telecom as well. And telecom isn't what it once was.
No.
Right? I mean, a lot of telecom, it's all wireless, it's all converged. We have, 3 or 4 major players now. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
You were in revenue then. How did the big picture view in telecom, not just for your company, but for the industry, did that cause you to make shifts in your career outside of telecom? Because here we are, we're both former telecom people. I'm no longer there. I'm doing something totally different. You're doing something that's relatively different in terms of industry, but the same field of revenue. So how did telecom industry path and having revenue cause you to shift, if it did?
Well, for me, when I was working in the telecom industry, I was working more on revenue assurance. So I was testing the networks, but I was testing it to make sure they're running through the billing system correctly, or actually from the network all the way through.
Okay.
But that also gave me the experience of the operational side of the house as it came through the billing system. And so when I was in the industry for about 4 to 5 years, and there I'm like, wait, I've been here for so long. I actually need to broaden it, and I don't want to pigeonhole myself in this industry. I need to broaden it to make sure I'm still enhancing my accounting experience, my accounting knowledge. So at that point, that's when I wanted to expand and grow my experience to continue with the revenue side and the operational side of the house.
Gotcha.
And then that's when I jumped to a software industry, ticketing and software.
Gotcha.
So that way I could still continue with the operational side of the house, and then still expand on the accounting side.
Yeah.
So really I had the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well, because it's allowing. So if I tie a lot of what you've just said all into one thing, it's like you got to use the education at the beginning of your career to get the job. You got to sell yourself, right? Then when you're in the job, pick your head up, look across the organization, and continue to learn, because revenue is changing. So, I remember way back in the day, it was SOP 97.2 and, software
Why
revenue.
are you dating us, David?
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have said that. And now it's, everything's from a SaaS model, and it's getting that monthly recurring revenue and comparing it to the contract.
Yeah.
So it's advanced so fast. You've seen a ton. So when you are interviewing people now, when let's just take 2 stages. Number 1, they're new, 2 years, 3 years of experience. What are you looking for there? And then they're 8, 9 years of experience, and they're climbing. They want to be in leadership. It's 2 different groups. What are the differences that you're looking for when you're sitting across the table from them?
Those that are newer in their career, I'm just looking at, their analytical skills, their detailed skills, and figuring out how to problem solve, if you will, and thinking the bigger scope. So, just asking them, obviously those behavioral questions, and, what in certain situations, how would you handle this? If you failed, what would you do? How would you communicate that? Really building them up that it's beyond just their accounting skill set, but how do you communicate with your peers and be able to resolve some current issues as you're growing. Those that are further along that want to move up in leadership, it's more of what's their leadership skills? How are they going to develop their employees? What are they going to take from what they've learned to really get into strategic questions versus the tactical situations, and being able to grow a department and work collaboratively with other stakeholders to have everyone understand the department and the inner workings of it. So really honing in on how they develop their team as well as themselves.
Because your assumption is, I mean, you're fact checking, right? They know the content, they know the technical skills.
Exactly.
So you got to check that to make sure, but you're more interested in how are they going to make people beneath them be able to continue to
Yeah,
develop.
because that's what eventually when you leadership, you're getting out of the details of accounting, right? Those are just coming in. You want to understand. You know how to do a balance sheet reconciliation. What goes into that? Give me an example of how you would do one, right? That's more in the tactical side of doing the day-to-day work. But the leadership really, how are you developing your team, and what are you doing as a leader to make them shine, not make you shine, because that's what it's about.
So when you're going into an interview for you, so now you're a leader, you're looking at another opportunity, let's flip the table. What are you looking for from the interviewer if you're the interview? Because you want to ask them questions, right? That shows, hey, I'm interested, I'm fact-finding on my own. You're checking me out, I'm checking you
Correct.
out. This isn't, it's not like we're going to go get married right now. We're still dating, we're checking each other. If we flip those tables, being a leader, what are you looking for?
So for me, coming into an organization, and I'm asking for transparency. Where's the growth of the organization? What's the stability of the organization? What issues am I walking into that I have to take care of, that I either have to fix, or what great situations are occurring that I have to continue developing, continue molding, and growing? Also looking at, what is the culture of the organization? What do you want from me as a leader? Are you going to give me, autonomy, support? How are you going to let me run this organization to make it the best it can be?
Yeah.
So kind of flipping, let's see,
Yeah.
honesty that one provides.
Yeah, this is so interesting. So this is so cool. So I'm gonna go back again. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but this is really interesting. So what do you get asked then by a person with 2 or 3 years of experience? Because this is so different, right? The approaches to interviewing, a leader interviewing for a job and what they're looking for is wildly different from a 3-year person and the type of questions. So what type of questions do you get from a 3-year person?
It's I usually get, did I answer your questions correctly? Right,
Okay.
because they're not
Yeah.
experienced, right?
That's cute.
But
Yeah.
also asking, what type of leader am I? How do I manage my team? So they can obviously get an insight into you as a person, because it's also, you're not here to prove yourself from a skill perspective, but is it a culture fit? Are you going to work well together? So and it should be a two-way question, right? But someone coming in really wants to understand, how are you going to manage me? What does it look like?
What are my expectations? What are my objectives that I need to hit on a weekly, monthly, whatever basis that is?
Yeah, and usually I'm forthcoming, so I already have that on the table before they even have to ask
Oh
those
yeah, I was
questions.
about to say, knowing you, you're like, all right, here's,
this is what you need to do.
yeah,
Here's your
slide-
test.
Yeah,
No, just kidding.
Slide it across the table, like you
Yeah.
got to achieve all this.
Right.
Now, yeah, that's definitely the way you would operate for sure. I think that's a good thing because you're super transparent about things.
Yep.
So I want to take a slight turn because we know our audience is people who are climbing in their career. They're 25 to 35-year-olds and they're climbing, or they're other leaders. And I've got to believe there are people out there. So you are a wife, mom of 2 kids who both are in competitive sports, right? And your husband travels
90% of the time.
90% of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, all the time.
Yeah. With COVID, it's after COVID, it calmed
Yeah.
down. But usually
Yeah.
it's on the road, Monday through Friday.
Yeah. With COVID, it was probably one of those situations where it's like, I wish you were traveling again.
Yeah, it was.
All the time. Yeah. This is so much better. Like you're messing up my routine.
Really? And then you're like, now you're not home. Like, how am I going to get my free vacations? I was relying on all those points.
Yes, exactly. So you've worked your way into your career, and it's been tough because you've had to advocate for yourself, right? Because you don't have a CPA and you're in an accounting world, and we talked a little bit about that. And now you've got heavy responsibilities. You work from home now 100% of the time. It's in the summer. Both your kids are home. You're probably trying to get them out to as many camps as you can.
Yeah.
Like,
But I have to drive them.
Yeah, exactly. So what is the secret sauce, if there is one? Like, is it time management? Is it focus? Like, how do you manage all those moving parts?
All the above. Time management, calendar. Accountants, they live by calendars and deadlines, right? So, I was listening to another podcast that you had, and they're all about their checklist, like cross the list off, right? Yep. Well, this one's more like, here's my calendar, like cross the time off, and really working on that calendar and blocking the time off. You really need to block the time off for your work and your, work life and personal life. And so just being able to balance that and then knowing where you can achieve, the certain deadlines and knowing your priorities, I'm able to shift. If I know something for work is due tomorrow, I know I need to focus on that versus something that's due next week. And then just shifting that and having that work-life balance and knowing that it can get done. I also, with my husband traveling, we've moved a lot with his job. So I don't have a support system like a lot of people do. I have no family around here. So it's all me. And as we talked, in my personal life, I don't ask for help. Yeah. So I just put all the burden on me, where my work life is completely different. But you can get it done. It's possible. Whatever you want to do, you can get it done. Whether you are happy being, a senior accountant versus all the way up to an executive, you just make it work.
Yeah. A little over a year ago, Christina Bailey was sitting with me across the table here, and she's the CFO at MTX Group. And we were talking about being a working mom and females in leadership, and we spent a lot of time speaking on that. And one of the things that she said is, when I was initially a CFO or a leader, I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, because I felt like, man, do I belong at this table, like in this group? Like, are they going to give me the credit that I've earned it? And she said it took her a while, and she just grew with confidence, realizing that she did belong, and she became more assertive. And she's on her third, what I would call, CFO job at her third different company. Does any of that resonate with you in terms of just building the confidence and knowing who you are as a leader and as a person and what your intentions are?
Yeah, I think that, the confidence, doesn't matter, man, woman, you all deserve to be there. If you have the credentials and you have the confidence and the drive to do the job, you have a right to be there. I think for me, as I was growing into my career, I think more of a confidence wasn't more so do I think I belong? It's more of, oh my gosh, can I do it? Like, it's the change. Everyone fears
That's
change,
really good.
Right? But of course you can do it. Just put it out there. But I think also, too, as you grow in your career, everyone needs to realize you need to ask for help. I tell my team members all the time, and it took me a while to understand this and learn it for myself, is the one word that gives you the most control and just so freeing is no. Stop being a yes person. Say no and tell people why you can't do this, or tell people that you don't understand. When you get into leadership, you build your network. You get with people that know the answer, because we don't have it all. I don't know all the engineering answers. I don't know, some days I forget my basic T accounts, right? So I ask, my team members, okay, what's the debit, what's the credit, right? But definitely building that peer organization, the peer network. And then also with females in the workplace, build your network, support one another, build each other up, and support one's dream and desire for their career path, because our career path is different. You don't have the same career path as someone else.
Yeah.
So help them achieve that.
Yeah. I really like that. Two things. Number one is saying no. I feel
so
like,
empowering.
Man, I'm hearing that more and more nowadays. Be willing to say no. Quit just taking on more responsibilities.
Yeah, know your limits.
Limit yourself and be great at those things. Because you can't be great at all 500 things and other people's priorities.
Yeah. And the more you take on more work, people are going to expect it of you. And that is just not good in the corporate world either. Like, you just don't give one employee more work because you're going to get it done. That's not fair either. But just say no. But I always tell my team, say no, but why? Hey, I can't do it today. I can get it to you next week. Does that work for you? Because I tell everyone has competing priorities. Your priority is not the next person's priority, and vice versa. And be very clear and concise in your communication.
I know at the end of this, because I really wanted to touch on females in the workplace, because I think that's really important to do. I mean, I've got a wife, I've got two girls, so I'm like, yes, we need to focus on females in the workplace. But what you just said is no, and then tell why. Like, that is across the board. That's gold right there to make sure. Like, you don't just say no and then turn around and walk off, but here's why. Or have them prioritize. Okay, if I do that, realize these are my other responsibilities. Can you help me prioritize what's most important then? And have your leader prioritize.
Yeah, and I tell my staff that to me all the time. If you feel that you can't get something done, come to me. I will prioritize. I will tell, even executive leadership that we can't get this done, and this is why. That's okay, because, businesses are working at 1,000 miles an hour, especially in this work environment today. We're international. You can work in so many different time zones, and every gadget that we have in front of us, it's at the tip of your fingers that things can get done. So you just have to understand and also shut it down.
Yes.
Right?
It's a
Learn
blessing
to
and a
shut
curse.
it down. Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm going to ask you then, as this is my final question for you, because we're at the end of this. It goes by fast.
Yes, it does.
So my final question for you is, how do you shut it down? Because you've got kids by yourself at night when your husband's on a trip and they've got their things, and then you've got work demands. Is it I put the phone in another room? Like, what is your, I'm done for the night, I can pick it up tomorrow?
For me, because one thing with working remotely, your hours are all different now. Working international companies, know your time limits, know your work schedule, whether with accounting, we always know month end, we have to work longer hours, and just shut it down. We are all working from home. It's hard to get away from it. I turn that computer off and I don't touch it till the next morning. But you also have to know yourself and know your limits. And I'm just like, I'm done. And I always tell my team, mental health is so important. Get it, we're not curing cancer. We're not conducting brain surgery right now. The work will be there tomorrow. It's okay. Take the time for yourself. So I shut it down about 5:30, 6 o'clock every night.
I need to get better at that.
It took a long time for me to learn that,
Yeah.
let me tell you.
That's really good. I'm definitely not letting my wife listen to this podcast. No, I really need to. I need to get better at that. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us today. It was great. I loved it. I was having you here. You always bring so much energy and passion to everything that you do. So we really appreciate you being on today. And for our listeners, thank you so much once again for joining us. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another edition of the Unity Talks podcast.
If you're looking for the next step in your career or the missing piece for your team, Unity Search has you covered. Whether it's finance and accounting, tax services, information technology, or human resources, Unity Search is here for you with experienced and dedicated hiring professionals. Reach out today and take the next step. Unity Search, placing you first.